Welcome to Hustle and Flow with Heather Hubbard, episode number 66. Hi, I'm Heather Hubbard, and I was a litigator, partner, and practice group leader at an AmLaw 200 firm. I know what it takes to rise to the top. I also know all too well the toll it can take on your personal life. So how do you shine bright without burning out? How do you embrace your ambition without selling your soul? You're listening to the Hustle and Flow podcast. Welcome back. I am your host, Heather Hubbard, and I am so glad that you are joining me this week. So today we are talking about what you're working for, why you're a lawyer, why you wake up each morning and do this work. It's not something that we talk about much, right? I mean, I guess when you're in law school, people might ask, why do you want to become a lawyer? And when you're first interviewing for jobs right out of law school, you might get that question as well. But once you become a lawyer, once you're like a year in, few people ask you why you're doing this. And the scarier part is we often fail to ask ourselves, why am I doing this? Why am I still doing this? Now, don't get me wrong. I am not trying to say that you should quit being a lawyer. It doesn't really matter what your profession is, but you should always be checking in and asking yourself on a regular basis, why am I doing this? Otherwise, we get stuck in ruts. We get stuck living a life that we may no longer want. And so as opposed to just being in a bad mood all the time, as opposed to wishing things were different, as opposed to just settling, it's important to ask these questions. And so because we don't talk about this much, I want to pose it to you today. I want you to think a little bit about this. So what are you working for? Why are you doing what you do right now? Can you imagine if we started having those kinds of conversations at networking events or when we meet someone for lunch? Typically, the very first question that you ask someone is, what do you do? Right? Like this is our go-to. What do you do? And so first and foremost, if you're an attorney, that might be the first thing that you say if you don't know the person. And you're not at a legal event. When people say, oh, what do? You say, I'm an attorney. Now, if you are at a legal networking event and someone says, what do? You might be more specific and you might say, oh, I'm an employment lawyer, or, oh, I do wills and estates. And then we try to come up with some conversation around that. So we start asking questions like, oh, yes, I have a friend that does that, or someone else in my firm does that, to try to, say, okay, I understand what you're saying. And then we might start asking questions. So do you deal with EEOC work? Are you doing litigation? Is it advice and counsel? Oh, are you dealing with the Me Too movement? Right? I mean, this is what happens, but you don't ever really get to know much about a person because you're just talking about what they do. What if we started asking people, oh, that's interesting. Why did you get into that work? Or, oh, that's interesting. Why do you choose to do that? Now, people might not be prepared for that because no one asks. And again, they may not even ask themselves. So you might trip them up a little bit, but it's a great conversation. And it's going to give you immediate insight as to this person and what motivates them and who they really are. And you're probably going to connect on a much deeper level. And it's going to happen pretty quickly. So it no longer has to feel like that, just small talk where you're trying to get to know someone. It's just, I've had a few conversations with people recently where they're like, oh my gosh, I just hate those because you don't feel like you're truly connecting. So this really wasn't the point of this podcast, but if you're in those situations where you want to connect with someone on a deeper level and it not just be so cold and contrived, ask them why. Ask them why they do what they do. So there's actually a book. There's a TED Talk. There was a TED Talk first, then came the book by Simon Sinek, and it's called Start With Why. And he says it's not about what you do, it's about why you do it. And so I think that that's something really important that we should be considering. Now, he was talking about it from a marketing perspective, and I often use that discussion with marketing workshops and when working with clients. But today, I think it's important from the perspective of being able to tap into your truth. It's not about what you do, it's about why you do it. And so if I ask you why you do something, I ask clients this a lot. Why are you doing that work? Or why are you doing that project? Why are you doing that? Why is that your goal? Most people will say, if they're being honest, most people will say money. I'm doing it for the money, either because they want to live a certain type of lifestyle or because they're trying to pay off debt, student loans, or another one that kind of comes in, but it's, in my opinion, still about money, is they'll say it's for the kids. They'll say, oh, I do this for my children so that they can have a better life, right? This is where it gets to the money, so that they can go to private school, so that they can have activities and trips and right. So it's really about having money in order to give their kids opportunities that they might not have without that money. But if you think about it, that we're working just for money, it sounds a bit shallow, right? I think we can all agree to that. Even if, we like money, I like money, I'm not going to lie. It sounds shallow when we say, well, I'm just working for money. And I'm sure you've heard the saying, because some people say it, I work to live, I don't live to work. Well, they're both actually kind of sad, right? Like if you're just working to live, well, you show up to work a lot, maybe 40 hours, maybe more than 40 hours. Why don't you like what you do when you're at work too, right? Is that not part of your life? I think that's just as sad as saying, I live to work. Although if you live to work and you're not ever trying to have a life outside of work, that's where that becomes sad too. So I think that both of those are wrong. We should have great, thriving, flourishing personal lives as well as careers. And sometimes that means we have to ask for more. We have to raise our expectations as to what is even possible. And I sometimes wonder if that's not the reason why we stop questioning, do I like what I'm doing? Because we're worried, we're afraid that if the answer is no, there's not a better option out there. And then we're just left with looking at the fact that we're not happy and we can't get what we really want. But the truth is, you can start working towards what you really want. It may not happen overnight. You just can't wish it into existence, but you think it anyway. It's subconsciously there. Even if you're not addressing it, even if you're refusing to look at it head on, it's there. So I think it's important that we get honest about what we're working for and why. So if we say it's money, and part of the reason why I think we say it's money is because that's just the easiest answer. It's hard to dig down and know the real truth. It's hard to, peel away those layers and say what it really is that we're working for or what we're working towards. So let's do that today. Let's do a little bit of that work because one, it's going to help reveal the truth, but two, it's going to help remind and motivate you and hopefully get you excited again about doing this work, about getting this opportunity, having this privilege to be an attorney. So the best way to get clear on this, to start this process, is to just ask yourself what you want your life to look like. If you had a blank slate, what would that look like? Now, that's easy for me. I think I've shared this before. One of my strengths is I'm futuristic, and that means that I can see things in really, really clear detail, even if it's not something I've seen before, and even if it's something in the future. So it's super easy for me to have a blank slate and say, yes, if I was going to paint my life tomorrow, here's what it would look like. I have many clients who simply cannot do that. They're like, I have a blank slate. What? What am I supposed to do with a blank slate? I need rules. I need guidance. I need you to at least give me some lines and give me some crowns, and I'll just color it in, right? But don't give me a blank slate because I'm going to be a deer in the headlights. Like, I don't even know what to do next. I'm frozen. So if you can do the blank slate, I want you to think about that. In a perfect world, what would your life look like? What would your days look like? If you cannot do that, I want you to simply ask yourself, well, what would make it a little bit better? Just a little bit. What would make my life just a little bit better, personally and professionally? If I just had a few tweaks here and there, what do I think would make me a little bit happier? So that's where we're aiming for first, is just what are our hopes and dreams? Some of you have not done that since high school, college, law school. So test that out. Test that out. What does that look like? But then once you do that, I want you to keep digging. So there is this book. It's called Embracing Fear by Tom Rutledge, and I highly recommend it, and we will put that in the show notes. To get the show notes, all you have to do is go to hustleandflowpodcast.com/66, and that's where you can get the show notes. And we'll have a link there if you're interested in checking out that book. So Embracing Fear, by the way, it's a really good book. It doesn't technically relate to what we're talking about right now, but the next exercise I'm going to ask you to do was inspired by an exercise that Tom has you do in this book. So he says that oftentimes when we're dealing with our fears, we just see the surface level answer. So he gives the example of he was working with someone, he's a psychologist, they were afraid of changing jobs. So this person they were a very successful executive HR director, but they thought they could go into consulting work. So they had clearly mapped out their plan. They had even gone ahead and talked to some people about being clients to make sure that this was viable. But he was experiencing a lot of stress and anxiety about making this change. So he comes in and he tells Tom, I'm just experiencing all of this anxiety because I don't know whether or not I should do it. And Tom says, well, what are you afraid of? And he says, well, I'm afraid of failing, right? I'm afraid of leaving behind this job that makes really good money and starting a new one and it failing. And for those of you that have ever considered starting your own firm or starting your own company, I'm sure you can relate to this, right? We all have these feelings. I think most of us would have these feelings if we've got an established job and we're thinking about starting a new one. And so what Tom says is that's just the surface level fear. That is not the real fear. And if you focus on that fear, you're going to do a ton of work and spend a ton of energy around something that is not even really what's bothering you. So you have to dig deeper. He says basically you're like at the top of this ladder, you're up in the air, and you've got to go down rung by rung. You have to keep climbing down the ladder until you get to the truth and you're standing on the ground. And so I use this same concept with goals, which is in the same way that the fear of failure is not the real fear. When you tell me, well, this is about money, or, well, if I do this, this will happen. That's not the truth. That's not really why you have that goal. There's something underlying it that is really driving you. So it's the same concept. So with Tom, he said, okay, well, if you fail in this new business, what are you afraid of happening? Right? And so the guy says, well, I'm afraid if I fail in this business, and I can't remember all of his examples, but it's like, it's embarrassing. It might ruin my reputation. I might, lose money. I might lose my house. I might lose my spouse. And it keeps going and going until at the very bottom, at the very core, the truth is this fear that he will be nothing, that he will be alone and he will be nothing. And the same is often true of goals and what we're doing things for. So at the surface level, we say it's money, but if you keep digging down, it's generally one of those really raw human feelings that, we lawyers try to avoid at all costs. So I want you to think about that. If your answer is, well, the reason I'm doing this is for money because money makes me happy. Like, and most people aren't going to say money, but they're going to say, I want this house. I want my kids to be in private school. But you might also say it's about reputation. I want to make my family proud. It could be any number of those things. Fine, let's climb down that ladder together. So if I ask you why you need a certain amount of money, you might tell me, well, I want this certain kind of house in this certain kind of neighborhood. And I might ask you, well, why? Why do you want a certain kind of house in a certain kind of neighborhood? Well, it makes me feel good about myself. I like to see beautiful things, and I, want it to be a safe neighborhood for my kids to play. And I feel like it's a status symbol that really shows my achievements. So then you would ask, why again? Why do you want that status symbol? Why do you want your kids to live in a good neighborhood? And you're going to answer again. And a lot of people get stuck and they're just like, why is that not a sufficient answer? So it's often good to do this with a friend. And by the way, if you have a coach or a therapist, do this with them. They can push back. But if you keep following this line of questioning, when it comes to status symbols, when it comes to reputation, achievements, things like that, it's generally related to this core need or this core desire to be accepted, to belong. And there are many things that we can do that can help us achieve that same feeling without, killing ourselves or doing work that actually is not fulfilling at all for us, right? It doesn't make us feel like we belong, but that's what we're trying to achieve. So knowing that is super helpful. If we start talking about kids, right? And it's like, well, I want my kids to go to the best schools. I want them to have the best opportunities. I want them to be safe. I don't want them to, ever have to deal with any adversity out in the world. So I'm trying to protect them and provide this for them. That's certainly noble. But the question is then, why? Why do you want that for them? And you might be like, well, who wouldn't want that? Right? But you have to answer it for yourself. Why do you want that for your kids? And it's probably going to be really personal. It might relate to your own upbringing, either what you didn't have and you're trying to provide something better, or you did have it and there's this fear of embarrassment if you don't provide that same level to your own kids, right? Like you somehow did less, that you were not as successful as the rest of your family. But it could just be that, you want your kids to be healthy and happy because, you love them dearly and that's what you want for them. And so that can give you information, though, that allows you to say, if I'm truly focused on loving my kids so that they are healthy and happy, it could be that they need more of me in their lives, not just my money, not just the safe neighborhood, not just the private schools. Maybe they need more of me. And then you might ask even what you want for them, right? Like, so if they're going to grow up and then do exactly what you're doing, then I guess you're giving them what? I was going to say 20, 25 years, although these days it might be 30. You're basically giving them a certain amount of time, and then they have to sacrifice everything for their kids, right? Following what you're saying, if that's the truth. If the reason you work so hard, the reason that you're trying to make all this money is for them to be healthy and happy, is it just for their first 25 years? Because they're probably going to follow in your footsteps. And if what you're teaching them is you have to make sacrifices for your kids to be healthy and happy, then we're basically saying 1 to 25, those are the people that get all of the love and the attention. After that, it's all sacrifices. So just think about that, right? Just keep digging down deeper. Keep climbing down that ladder until you get to the truth of what you're truly wanting. And that can then reveal a lot about what you're working for. Because it could be you are working for something that is totally different than you say. And when we don't regularly check in on this stuff, it is so easy for us to get distracted and focused on the wrong things and basically start engaging in self-defeating behavior. So I'm going to get a little bit vulnerable and share a story with you that I hadn't planned on sharing, mostly because it's just stinging, but I think that if I can share with you that I had a recent loss that, maybe it will give you permission to be honest about your own losses, because I know we always try to portray that we've got it all together and, we get everything we want, but sometimes we don't, and we don't generally talk about that. But so for me, depending on how long you've been listening to this podcast, you know that I'm a high achiever. I'm super competitive. Like, this is just part of my personality, which is fine. I fully embrace that. If I tried to be someone else, I would be unhappy. But what that means is I can easily get distracted with the wrong things. So, for example, I, especially early on in my career, but it still happens some, I can follow after certain awards or accomplishments or recognitions that I think are going to represent something, right? And if you ask me why, right? What are you working for? Why are you doing this? Why are you wanting to achieve that award, that recognition, that goal? I can articulate for you, because I'm a lawyer, I can tell you something that sounds very logical. Like, well, I'm building up my reputation, or this will give me credibility. And if I have this announcement that I can share with the world, then that will get me more clients, or it helps me spread my message. And by the way, all of those things are and can be true. But it doesn't negate the fact that that may not be the truth. That's the surface answer that I'm giving. But if I want to really dig deep, it's probably got more to do with being accepted. So I have a lot of awareness, by the way, around this issue, and yet I can still get tripped up by it. So that's why we always have to be on top of this stuff. And we just need to be honest that we're humans. But there is this, I don't really want to call it a competition, but that's kind of what it is. It's called the Tory Burch Foundation, and she has what are called fellows, a class of fellows. And so you can apply to be part of this fellowship. And if you're selected, you go through this year-long program, and it's for female entrepreneurs. So when it first came out a few years ago, someone forwarded it to me. I think in my first year of business, and they said, "Oh, you should apply for this." And I was like, I love Tory Burch, and I love fellowships and mentoring and awards. So yes, why wouldn't I apply for that? But I went through the entire application, which by the way is grueling. And I was just like, oh, I'm not ready. I'm not ready. I'm not capable of getting this yet. But it became this weird, that became the guiding star. I was like, okay, but that's what I'm going to work towards. That's my goal. I'm doing all this other stuff in my business, but I really want this Tory Burch fellowship, but I'm not ready yet. So I'm going to go ahead and map out what it will look like. When will I be ready? When will I be best suited to win? And when will I be best suited to really leverage the opportunity? So I thought it's probably going to be about the third year. So back this fall, it's every fall, I said, okay, I'm going to apply this year. Now, when I said it was grueling, I mean, the amount of time I spent on this was crazy. I mean, it was probably 50 hours. Of course, I have a business, so a lot of this time was spent nights and weekends. A ton of work. It involved asking for recommendations. I mean, there was a video, there was so much involved. But I felt really, really good about it. Really good about it because, I'd thought this through and I applied and I was just like, oh, I'm going to get this. I'm certain I'm going to get this. I've done everything right. I'm going to get this. Well, come end of February, I get an email that says, we're so sorry you did not get this. And I was crushed. I am not going to lie. I was crushed. It was just such a defeating blow. And some tears were shed. I'm not going to lie. I'm not a crier, but I cried over that one. I was so sad. And it took a few days. I mean, I was really grieving it. And I kept journaling. I was like, what is wrong with me? Why am I so upset about this? And it was through this digging process that I realized that I had decided early on that achieving that Tory Burch Fellowship was going to be proof that I did the right thing. It was going to be proof that leaving my firm and starting my own company was the right decision. It was going to be proof to the rest of the world that I was doing a good job. It was going to be proof that I was well on my way and I was a legitimate entrepreneur. I was asking Tory Burch to give me approval. And I can laugh about this now. But truly and honestly, I wasn't like concerned about what the business was actually doing or whether I felt like I was a success or whether I felt like I was doing the right thing. Instead, I needed an outside source to basically crown me or grant me that permission. And when I didn't get it, I felt completely rejected. And I thought, oh my gosh, maybe my business is not doing well. Maybe I made a mistake. I mean, I literally had the thought when I went back and reread through my journaling, I was like, I'm going to have to go back and work at a law firm. That's the kind of crazy making that was going on in my mind. And I just share this because you might have really wanted or really be wanting a certain title, a certain position, a certain job. Or, maybe it's for you, it's finding the right person and getting married and having children, whatever it is. Sometimes we can attach this future desire of what we want, right? When I was talking about the vision, what would make our lives better? We attach our core desires to something super shallow. And so we say, well, for me, it was like, I just need this Tory Burch fellowship. And for you, it might be, I just need to make partner, or I just need to make equity partner, or I just need to get into a big law firm, or I just need to become the GC. I just need to have a certain book of business, or I just need to make a certain amount of money. And that will then tell me something. It will either make me happy, or it will tell me that I'm on the right track, or it will tell me I am good enough. I mean, at the end of the day, isn't that what it really is for a lot of us? We just want someone to say, you're good enough. You're good enough. And we get really tripped up by this stuff. So I do want you to think about what you want your life to look like. I do want you to really think about what you're working for, but I want you to dig deep. Don't accept the shallow response that you give yourself because there's probably something more to it. And if you stay focused on the shallow aspects, what happens is even when you get what you say you want, it doesn't actually make you happier. Here's the thing. Because I now know why I was really wanting that fellowship, I was wanting a stamp of approval to feel like I made the right decision. I now know that had I gotten that fellowship, it would have provided a complete false sense of security for me. Yes, there would have been a high from being able to announce it. Yes, there would have been a high from the buzz around it. Yes, it would have been great PR. And so it would have given me a boost for a little bit. But once it was over, I would still have that same lingering feeling of needing acceptance and approval. Because even though that's what I'm truly wanting, what I'm going after can't give me that, right? So in the same sense that we say, well, if I have this amount of money, then I can have this house. Or, once I get that title, then I can have more freedom. Or once I raise happy, healthy kids, I'll just feel content with my life, right? They won't misbehave. But the truth is, even when you get that house, even when you get that title, you might pop some champagne, it'll feel great. And then you're like, wait, why do I feel stuck? Why do I feel I'm not happy again? What's going on? And so that's why we have to dig. We can't just accept what our minds tell us is what we're truly working for. We got to dig even deeper. Because if we know what we really want, we can start getting it now. We don't need to wait for that job. We don't need to wait for that title. We don't need to wait for that house. We don't need to wait for an award or a fellowship. We can just start going after what we really want right this moment. What would provide us the most happiness, joy, fulfillment in this moment. You don't achieve a certain level of success and then wake up and everything's different. So we really have to work on embracing now what we want. So I hope this has been a bit thought-provoking and it made you question what you're working for, truly, and whether or not your day-to-day life reflects what you are truly wanting at the end of the day, and whether or not you can make some changes in your life and your career to start to mirror what it is that you're really wanting and desiring that would make you a happier person. So with that, I will tell you, this topic kind of reminds me of two different things. One is the Life and Law Live event that's coming up, part of what we're working through is what is your vision, and then creating the strategic plan to execute around it. You do need to have some thoughts. If you have no idea what you want out of life, that event's not going to be for you, because we're going to go through the vision exercise and you're going to be stuck and be like, I can't move forward. But if you do have an idea of what you want your life to look like, you're doing a little bit of digging, but you're like, how do I actually make that happen? How do I take my long-term vision and short-term vision and get it all aligned and come up with a plan where I'm actually making progress as opposed to just getting through each day? I highly recommend you check that out and come join us. lifeandlawlive.com. And again, we'll put that in the show notes as well. We sold out more than half of those spots in just the first week of it being open for registration. So even though it's in November, this is not one where you're going to be able to wait. I think we have about 20 spots left at the time of me recording this podcast. So it's probably less than that now, but you can go to the website. We're keeping an accurate count. We would love to have you for that. If you feel like you have no idea what you should be doing and you're now having an existential crisis, I apologize. But if you're like, I don't know if I'm doing the right thing in my career, I do have a free video series that supports the Legal Career Clarity course. It is a free video series. And at the end, you will be invited to join the course if you want. It's a 6-week online course that you go at your own pace. But, you can always just go through this video series. There's exercises, get what you need out of it, and you're still going to get a ton of value just from having participated in that. So if you want to check that out, you can go to legalcareerclarity.com and you can sign up for that free video series. And that can also help you get a little bit more clarity around what you want to be doing with your life. All right, this has been a fun topic for me. I hope my sharing my recent experience is also helpful for you. And I look forward to seeing you next week. Talk soon. For show notes, downloads, and other free resources, and to keep the conversation going, head on over to hustleandflowpodcast.com. See you there.